Alright, how's it going, everyone? I'm back here again with the video I promised based on the poll where I said I'd rank a certain band's albums depending on, which one it was, and, all that stuff. And most people voted for Rancid in this one, so we're going to be doing all of Rancid's albums ranked here. And, Rancid, of course, has been around since, like, the early 90s after Operation Ivy disbanded. And, they kind of just went their own ways. Like, Tim and Matt started Rancid and everything after this. And, they had a different drummer as well named Brett Reed. And this guy's no longer in the band, by the way. I really enjoyed his drumming, though, in the band. And that might be a lot of the reason why I enjoy earlier Rancid compared to more modern Rancid. Not hating on their new drummer totally, but just my personal opinion, I like Brett's drumming a bit better than Brandon's drumming. So, take what you will of that. The more recent Rancid albums, I don't like as much as a lot of the older ones, especially Honor Is All We Know. And Honor Is All We Know is actually going to be on the bottom of this list because this is my least favorite Rancid album. And why is it my least favorite album? I mean, it's the most formulaic out of them all. It's like they took every basic thing from a Rancid song and put it into this album and kind of dumbed it down a bit more. Even the lyrical content was nothing like a lot of the other albums. I mean, even in like Evil's My Friend and stuff like that, like even that song just, I mean, it's okay, I guess, but it's a song that really kind of gets old very quickly after the first couple times of hearing it, and you're like, man, Rancid's got so much better tunes than this. And honestly, I hardly ever listen to this album. I've only listened to it like twice, I believe. Because, it was just the most generic Rancid album there probably is, Like, it wasn't, like, even indestructible back in the day, because that was something new for Rancid, and, we'll get to that album in a bit, but, that one compared to Indestructible even is, like, nothing, because Indestructible had those, melodies and everything that really stuck with me, and, they had a lot of good lyrics to the album, but this one, like, it's kind of just the most formulaic Rancid album ever. It's like everything you'd expect to hear from Rancid, but kind of dumbed down a bit to an even more basic form, and it's just not an album I really would go back and listen to much at all. And my second least favorite one is Let the Dominoes Fall. Now, I mean, this one still had some songs, like a couple that I kind of dig on it. Liberty and Freedom wasn't too bad, And they had a little bit of, acoustics to this album, too. And they had the song Civilian Ways, which, I mean, that song's okay. It's not too bad. I mean, it's still better than Arrested in Shanghai by quite a bit. For, it's kind of almost more acoustic kind of song. I mean, I don't know if I call Arrested in Shanghai an acoustic song, but it's kind of a slower song compared to a lot of their other songs. And, there was The Highway, which, that's an alright song too, but still there's a lot of formulaic stuff on here too. LA River is definitely my least favorite song on this album, and probably one of my least favorite Rancid songs of all time. So that brings it down. And East Bay Night, another kind of formulaic, basic kind of Rancid song. And there's a couple others like that on here. Up to No Good is an alright song, but, there's still quite a bit on this album that's really formulaic. New Orleans, I mean, it's a little better, but still kind of has that formulaic feel to it, that a lot of modern Rancid songs kind of fail on. I mean, not all of them, but, there's still a good chunk sometimes that, like, kind of fall flat. Especially in this era of Rancid, like, early to mid 2010s, and including the Let the Dominoes Fall era, which is what I'm talking about here. But yeah, this album had a few songs I come back to from time to time, but, I still listen to a lot of the other Rancid albums a lot more than this one, so this one's gonna be closer to the bottom for that reason. And next one I got on here is Troublemaker, and this one was kind of almost same thing. There's still a bit of formulaic stuff in here for sure. I mean, it's definitely more interesting in terms of, like, instrumentation than Honor Is All We Know. You got some acoustic parts mixed with some, crunchy lead guitar parts and everything, but still, it's kind of got the basic kind of Rancid formula, but still done it in a little bit better of a way than Honor Is All We Know, where it was almost like basically kind of like if you were to make an AI of Rancid, like that's what it would be. Like, I can see that with this album a bit too, but like, you know, there were some songs I kind of enjoyed on here. You know, I enjoyed Track Fast, I enjoyed Intimate Close-Up of a Street Punk Troublemaker. Jeez, I can't even say the name, but I enjoyed Go On Rise Up, which is one of the bonus tracks. You know, that might be one of my favorite ones on the album. But yeah, this album, you know, it's not an album I necessarily say is terrible, but I mean, it's not one I really go back to compared to a lot of the other ones as well, along with Let the Dominoes Fall. They're pretty close in my ranking, you know. This one's just a little better because, you know, it doesn't have LA River on it. So that's basically the only reason why I'm ranking this one higher, so yeah. And next one I got on here is Tomorrow Never Comes. Now this one was the last album that Rancid released, and you know, okay, some songs still have that formulaic kind of vibe to them, but still they kind of, you know, did a little bit different though. They went in with a more hardcore kind of sound into this album, you know, sort of like they did with their album in 2000. I still enjoy Rancid 2000 better than this, but, you know, it's still not bad for, you know, a band that's been going as long as they have, and, you know, I can appreciate this album actually for, you know, still doing stuff a little bit different than, you know, the typical kind of Rancid album that they were doing a bit before this. This is kind of, you know, a bit of a change, which I think Rancid kind of needed during the time. It's certainly not a perfect album. It's still got some songs that are kind of like hit or miss, but, you know, I kind of like that they put a bit more of a hardcore vibe into this one, because I think it definitely kind of fits where Rancid's headed right now, at least. You know, them getting older. Sometimes them doing the more hardcore stuff makes it, you know, have that more edge, you know, which I kind of like about Rancid, and that's what I like about some of the songs in this album, is they have that hardcore edge to them that they're good at sometimes, you know. And hey, I'll still sing along to some of these songs. And next one we got on the list is Indestructible. Now this one actually has some kind of cool songs, and I think some people hate on this album a bit too much, you know, because they rate this one of their least favorite Rancid albums, and I'm like, hey, you know, this kind of has some pretty cool stuff on it still. Compared to some of their most recent albums, it's definitely better than any of their most recent records, I'll say. You know, I mean, Fall Back Down's a pretty good song, you know, that's one of their more known songs. But, I mean, Red Hot Moon, it's a pretty catchy tune, I'm not gonna lie, you know, it's kind of like Rancid took this album and, you know, made it kind of almost like their next few albums, but kind of dumbed down a bit. But in this album, it actually, a lot of it wasn't bad, actually. It's just, you know, after this album, it kind of got old after like 2 or 3 times, you know. But still, I mean, these songs are better lyrically, you know. The lyrical flows a lot better with this album and a lot of these songs. Like Red Hot Moon specifically, like a lot of the time when they try to do some of their ska stuff nowadays, it's not really like it used to be in ways. I mean, I think they still have the ability to make it that way, it's just they needed the right lyrical flow and everything, and they were better at it during this time and in the Life Won't Wait album as well. So, I mean, this album, it's not a perfect album, okay? Arrested in Shanghai is not a very good song in my opinion. It's probably my least favorite song on this record. But, I mean, come on, you got Start Now, you got Django, you got Out of Control, you got all these great songs on here that really have the right flow to them, you know, and have that right, like, edgy, in-your-face energy, but still having kind of melodies at the same time. You know, this album did it really well compared to a lot of their other records, I think, that they've done in recent years, and, you know, I can actually dig this album quite a bit for that. And you got Stand Your Ground on here, and the lyrical flow in that album is just, or that song is just so perfect. You know, 10 out of 10 for the lyrical content and the lyrical flow in that song, man. And the beat, too, man, it's a good song. It's one of the best songs on this record, I think, along with Start Now and Django. And, you know, of course, there's still those kind of basic kind of Rancid songs like Born Frustrated. I mean, okay, the song's alright, but, you know, I feel like they based songs like that, and, like, they took songs like that and kind of made it into a lot of the Rancid songs I have today like that, basically. Because that's kind of the sound that they were going for with a lot of these recent records, I feel like, with songs like Born Frustrated. And it was kind of, you know, the wrong direction, I think, compared to, you know, a lot of these other songs they had on here, like Start Now and Django, because, man, these songs can definitely get you motivated, you know? So I could appreciate this album for that, and that's why I'm not ranking this one lower. This is why I'm ranking this one higher than, like, any of their other recent records, so yeah. And the next one I'm putting on here is Rancid 1993. Now, this album actually had some pretty kick-ass tracks on it, like Hyena. You had Out of My Mind on here, Adina. You know, there's plenty of kick-ass songs on here, you know. They sort of have that hardcore edge to them. And, you know, this is the album without Lars, actually. And I think Lars added a bit to the band, too, and he joined in Let's Go. This album, you know, it had some pretty killer tunes on it. I mean, the lyrical content on it is pretty good. You know, it's not a perfect album, you know. After a bit of hearing this album a bit, you kind of want to hear something a little bit different. And you kind of wish they, you know, put a little bit of a spin into this album a bit more than, you know, what they did. But hey, you know, there's a lot of songs on here that I do go back to quite a bit. Hyena, of course, is one of them. Out of My Mind, like I said, and numerous others. And, you know, you even had songs like Union Blood on here and Whirlwind and everything. And, you know, it was something a bit different during the time for sure. But, you know, I mean, Operation Ivy was something a bit different. But, hey, you know, this album actually wasn't bad for a band just starting out, honestly. I mean, sure, they put out a little bit better material than this. But, hey, you know, it's pretty good for a band just starting out, honestly. And they did pretty good for, you know, Lars not being in the band during the time. And I think he added a lot to the band. But, you know, this album still kicks a lot of ass, I'll say. You know, there's still a lot of very kick-ass songs in this album. So I have to give this album props for that. And next one I'm going to go with is Rancid 2000. Now, there's a lot of songs in this record, but, you know, there's a lot of short ones too. But, man, I really love the edge to this album that they did. I love that they were doing something, you know, a bit more hardcore with this one, After Life Won't Wait. You know, it just made their career so much more interesting with those two records, you know, seeing the direction that they were going, and, you know, the fact they were able to blend so many cool styles into their music. And, you know, this was yet another album After Life Won't Wait that really proved it. You know, of course, they had Out Come the Wolves, which, you know, that album's amazing as well, and that's the album that really put them on the map. But, you know, that album really set stone for, you know, what they would do in the future. You know, that they were able to, you know, experiment a bit more with different kinds of sounds, you know, implement a bit more ska into their stuff, like, you know, some of the stuff on Life Won't Wait. But this album, it had a lot of the hardcore stuff on it that they did the best probably on this stuff in terms of, like, going for a hardcore sound than, like, any other record they've done, I'd say. It's better than Tomorrow Never Comes, you know, considering I think Tomorrow Never Comes was a little bit too short, honestly, compared to this one. But, you know, there's so many good songs in this album. I mean, you got Golden Gate Fields, you got Rattlesnake, there's Antennas, and so many other just absolute bangers on this album. And this is why I'm ranking this one so high. I know some people rank this one lower too, because, you know, it wasn't the most accessible compared to a lot of the other ones, and it wasn't the most, like, commercially successful compared to some of the other ones. But this album still has a lot of good things about it, you know. And, you know, some will say Tim's vocals weren't the best on this album, but I mean, it kind of fit well with the music, you know what I mean? It fit pretty well with the music. And, you know, I mean, it's Tim Armstrong. He's not, like, fucking, you know, Freddie Mercury or something, you know. He's got a little bit of edge to him, and this whole band has a bit of edge to him, so it kind of makes sense as to, you know, why they kind of go a bit, I guess you'd say, against the grain, you know, and not really following all musical rules. But, I mean, it's punk, so what do you expect? They're not going to follow every little musical rule, so, yeah. And next one we got here is Life Won't Wait. Now, man, this album is definitely a good one. You know, it stretches on for quite a bit, but, you know, there's a lot of different things they did with this that worked out really well, I think, for, you know, them experimenting a little bit. Because, you know, when some bands experiment after their, the album that really makes it break out, they kind of start going downhill a bit. But, you know, this album, I think, you know, even though it's still not an Out Come the Wolves, it's still pretty fucking awesome. And, you know, there's all sorts of songs I go back to all the time on this one. There's Blood Clot, you know, Hoover Street, Crane Fist, you know, Who Would Have Thought. There's just a lot of good songs on this record, you know. And they had some more melodic stuff too, of course, like Who Would Have Thought, and that album was, you know, it's actually, you know, one of the more known songs in this album. But you know, this album was pretty cool. You know, they blended a lot of really cool styles into this one. And they even had some other people join in on this one in the more ska type of songs, like Life Won't Wait and everything, which Life Won't Wait, another great song, great lyrical content to it, great message and everything. You know, this album, definitely one I go back to quite a bit. And, you know, I was listening to this album just recently at work, actually, and appreciating just, you know, the way they were experimenting with, like, more ska-oriented type of songs, you know. But, I mean, they were doing that a little bit with An Out Come the Wolves, but, you know, this album, they did it a bit more to a higher degree, because a lot of these songs, like Crane Fist, have that a lot implemented into them as well, you know, that Specials kind of vibe, you know, and, there's some song, of course, Life Won't Wait is another one of those. It's like that, and you know, of course, they still have the songs that are really like just, you know, uppity kind of punk songs. Of course, like Blood Clot as well. And Hoover Street, of course, you know, that song really flows really well with this album as well. And honestly, at this time in their career, I think this was the perfect album for them to put out, and you know, I can appreciate this album for that, so yeah. And number 2 here, we got Let's Go, and this is when Lars first joined the band. And man, this album, it's got a lot of songs on it, but almost like from beginning to end, it's definitely like something you'd never heard before, kind of. But I mean, you know, it's got that punk energy into it, of course, which, you know, of course was a thing before them, and you know. But you know, this was a unique kind of punk like I never heard before, and you could tell they were really evolving from their first record. And this really showed it, especially when Lars was added to the band, and, you know, on lead guitar and vocals and everything. And, man, there was a lot of good stuff about this album. I mean, there's literally a tattoo I want to get of one of the lyrics that's in one of these songs called Radio. And Radio is one of my favorite Rancid songs of all time, for sure. And I wanted to get a tattoo of the lyric When I Got the Music, I Got a Place to Go on my arm for a bit, and of course, you know, I've had expenses come up, haven't been able to, but it's a tattoo I want to get eventually. And this album had such a great message to it in so many ways. You know, there's lots of different kind of songs on it, you know, a lot of different topics talked about in this. You know, there's songs like 7 Years Down, songs like Nihilism and Let's Go and As One, and these are all great songs, man. These songs really, the organization of these songs couldn't have been better, honestly, for the time being. And, you know, this was like a straightforward kind of, like, street punk kind of record, but it's one of the best street punk kind of records I've ever heard, you know. And it definitely really stood out to me when I first heard it as, like, you know, some of the best 90s punk I had heard during the time. You know, or at least during the early 90s, you know. And, you know, their songwriting was really starting to get good with this album. And, you know, there's only one record I can think of by Rancid that really I go back to more than this one. And that's An Out Come the Wolves. And this is definitely my favorite Rancid record. You know, they had a bit more to this one, you know. And Let's Go, okay, you know, it's got numerous great songs on it. I love it from beginning to end. But this one I love from beginning to end as well, just a little bit more because, you know, they're kind of proven they can really add, you know, an even more kind of original sound to their stuff and really set their tone with this record. And that's what I love about this album so much, you know, they set their tone more than anything with this one. Honestly, lyrics couldn't have been better, man. This was when they were at their absolute prime as of lyrics, man. And the flow, the lyrical flow in with the songs, man, I mean, Lockstep and Gone, you had just so many of them, like, you know, Maxwell Murder, Avenues and Alleyways, Journey to the End of the East Bay, Junkie Man, so many of these songs are just, like, absolute bangers that I go back on all the time, man. You know, these songs are so catchy, the production was perfect. Props to Jerry Finn for producing this one as well, because he did a great job on it. And there's so many albums that he helped other artists on that I seem to really enjoy as well. And his production skills really add a bit to it, which, you know, I appreciate about this album too. And, you know, the bass lines in this album, like, so many punk bassists could learn so much from. Because, you know, they're so easily accessible and so catchy and everything that, you know, this is like one of the perfect albums for a bass player to go to if they're going towards a punk sound, in my opinion. And of course, this is the record that they would take off on as well, because he had singles like Ruby Soho, Time Bomb, Roots Radical. You know, those songs really made them take off and get themselves known in the punk scene. And this was also the same year that Smash became a big hit and Dookie became a big hit, which, you know, this one was like added to it because '94 was like the year when like punk was absolutely in the mainstream for a few years, you know. I mean, it still is in a lot of ways, but like '94, Smash, Dookie, and Out Come the Wolves blew up. You know, and Out Come the Wolves wasn't as big as, you know, Smash or Dookie, but this song was still, I believe, a platinum record. So, you know, this album really caught on for a lot of people, you know. And, you know, what can I say? It kind of deserved it, you know what I mean? It's a great record from start to finish, man. There's not one skip on this album, and it's one I go back to quite a bit. And I even liked it so much that I even got the 2015, because it's got a couple bonus tracks on it that I think are pretty good too, like That's Entertainment. And Only Entertainment, my bad, I said it wrong. But yeah, and it's got Blast 'Em on it too. Blast 'Em is probably the one I go back to a little bit more, but yeah, you know, this album, man, like, if you're looking for one of the best punk albums of all time, this one I'd say is definitely it. So yeah, check this one out if you haven't, and really just Rancid in general. I mean, of course, you know, even if it's like in some of the stuff from Honor Is All We Know, check Rancid out, of course. I mean, of course, Honor Is All We Know is on the bottom of the list compared to this one. I think those songs don't get anywhere with me compared to those. But yeah. And Out Come the Wolves is amazing. You know, 10 out of 10 for this record, man. I go back to this one all the time. So yeah, that is my ranking of every Rancid album. So yeah, you guys want to put in the comments what your rankings would be from, you know, worst to best, best to worst, whatever. You put them in the comments below. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.